The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training facility as Marcus Chen adjusted his baseball cap for the third time. At 19, he looked even younger than his age suggested. His lean frame and smooth face made him appear like he belonged in a college dormitory rather than on a professional shooting range surrounded by seasoned military personnel and law enforcement officers. The annual National Precision Shooting Championship had drawn competitors from across the country. Former Navy SEALs, Marine Corps snipers, SWAT team members, and professional shooters had traveled thousands of miles for this event. The prize wasn't just monetary, it was respect, recognition, and the chance to claim the title of best precision shooter in the nation. Marcus walked through the registration area, his worn duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The conversations around him buzzed with technical discussions about ballistics, wind compensation, and equipment modifications. Veterans shared war stories while police officers compared their latest tactical gear acquisitions. Everyone seemed to know everyone else, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a family reunion than a competition. When Marcus approached the registration desk, the middle-aged woman behind the table looked up with a confused expression. She glanced at his paperwork, then back at his youthful face, then at the paperwork again. "Honey, are you sure you're in the right place?" she asked kindly. "The junior division competition is next month." Marcus smiled politely and slid his identification across the table. "I'm registered for the main event, ma'am." The woman's eyebrows rose as she examined his documents. Behind him, a gruff voice chuckled. "That kid looks like he should be worrying about algebra homework, not rifle competitions." The comment drew laughter from several nearby competitors. Marcus turned to see a burly man in his 40s wearing a tactical vest covered in patches from various military units. The man's arms were crossed, and his expression mixed amusement with disbelief. "What's your background, kid?" the man asked, not unkindly but with obvious skepticism. "You look like you just graduated high school." "I did graduate high school," Marcus replied calmly. 3 months ago." This admission triggered another wave of chuckles and head shakes from the gathered shooters. Stories began circulating about young shooters who had shown up unprepared, only to waste everyone's time and potentially endanger themselves and others with inexperience. Marcus completed his registration and moved toward the equipment inspection area. His rifle case was notably different from the others around him. While most competitors carried expensive custom cases with foam inserts and multiple compartments, Marcus carried a simple black case that had seen better days. The latches were worn, and one corner showed signs of being dropped more than once. At the inspection station, Marcus opened his case to reveal a Barrett M82A 1.50 caliber rifle. The weapon was impressive but clearly well used. The finish showed wear marks, and while it was meticulously maintained, it lacked the pristine appearance of the custom rifles belonging to other competitors. The range officer conducting the inspection was a retired Marine gunnery sergeant named Rodriguez. He had seen thousands of rifles in his career and could assess a weapon's condition at a glance. As he examined Marcus's Barrett, his expression grew increasingly interested. "This rifle has seen some serious use," Rodriguez commented, running his hands along the barrel. "Where did you acquire it?" Marcus explained that the rifle had belonged to his grandfather, a Vietnam War veteran who had later worked as a civilian contractor. His grandfather had purchased the Barrett years ago and had spent countless hours teaching Marcus the fundamentals of precision shooting on their family's rural property. Rodriguez continued his inspection, checking the scope mounting, trigger mechanism, and overall condition. Despite its worn appearance, the rifle was in excellent mechanical condition. Someone had clearly invested significant time and expertise in maintaining it properly. "Your grandfather taught you well," Rodriguez said approvingly. "This weapon is ready for competition." As word spread about the young competitor with the Barrett, curiosity began to replace some of the initial dismissiveness. Several veterans approached Marcus to ask about his experience and background. They learned that he had been shooting since age 12, that his grandfather had been a demanding instructor, and that Marcus had spent summers working at a local gun range where he had access to various firearms and received informal coaching from customers who were former military and law enforcement. Despite these revelations, most competitors remained skeptical. Youth and enthusiasm were no substitute for experience under pressure. Many had seen talented young shooters crumble when faced with the psychological pressure of competition, especially when competing against seasoned professionals who had proven themselves in life-or-death situations. The competition format consisted of multiple stages designed to test different aspects of precision shooting. Competitors would face various distances, weather conditions, time constraints, and shooting positions. The final stage would separate the true champions from the merely skilled, requiring shots at extreme distances under challenging conditions. As the first day of competition began, Marcus found himself assigned to a squad with 7 other shooters. His squad mates included 2 former military snipers, a SWAT team leader, a competitive shooting champion, and 3 serious amateur marksmen who had been competing for years. The squad leader, a former Army Ranger named Thompson, reviewed the day's schedule and safety protocols. He emphasized the importance of following all safety procedures and maintaining awareness of other competitors' positions and activities. During the briefing, Thompson's gaze lingered on Marcus longer than the others. "Son, this isn't a video game or a backyard plinking session. These are serious competitors with years of experience. If you feel overwhelmed or unsafe at any point, don't hesitate to speak up." Marcus nodded respectfully. "I understand, sir. I'm here to compete to the best of my ability." The first stage involved shooting at 300-yard targets from supported prone positions. Each shooter had 10 minutes to fire 5 rounds for score, with points awarded based on accuracy. The conditions were ideal: minimal wind, good lighting, and stable shooting platforms. As the squad moved to their assigned firing line, Marcus observed the other competitors' preparations. They meticulously checked their equipment, recorded environmental conditions, and made careful adjustments to their scopes. Many used sophisticated rangefinders, weather meters, and ballistic calculators to optimize their shooting solutions. Marcus's preparation appeared much simpler. He used a basic rangefinder to confirm the distance, observed the wind flags along the range, and made modest adjustments to his scope. His approach seemed almost casual compared to the detailed technical preparations of his competitors. When his turn came to shoot, Marcus settled into his prone position with smooth, practiced movements. His stance was textbook perfect, and his rifle handling demonstrated years of proper instruction. As he prepared for his first shot, the background chatter of other competitors gradually faded. His first shot broke cleanly, and the target spotter called out a solid hit in the high-scoring ring. Marcus cycled the bolt smoothly and prepared for his second shot without any apparent rush or concern about the pressure of competition. By his fourth shot, the other members of his squad had stopped their own preparations to watch. Marcus was shooting with a rhythm and consistency that suggested significant experience despite his youthful appearance. His fifth and final shot of the stage produced another high-scoring hit, giving him a total score that placed him among the top performers for the first stage. The result was impressive enough to draw attention from competitors in other squads. As they moved to the second stage, Thompson approached Marcus with a different expression than he had worn earlier. "That was solid shooting, kid. Where exactly did you learn to shoot like that?" Marcus explained his background more thoroughly, describing the years of instruction from his grandfather and the additional practice he had gained working at the gun range. He mentioned that his grandfather had been particular about fundamentals and had required Marcus to demonstrate consistency before allowing him to attempt longer distance shooting. The second stage presented greater challenges. Shooters had to engage targets at 500 yards while dealing with a crosswind that had developed as the morning progressed. The shooting position was standing with support, which required greater stability and control than prone shooting. This stage would reveal more about each competitor's true skill level. Wind reading and compensation became critical factors, and the standing position amplified any errors in technique or equipment handling. Marcus's performance on the second stage was even more impressive than his first stage showing. His ability to read the wind and make appropriate adjustments suggested an intuitive understanding of external ballistics that typically took years to develop. As the first day of competition concluded, Marcus found himself ranked in the top 10 overall, ahead of several highly regarded competitors with decades of experience. The initial laughter and dismissive comments had been replaced by respectful curiosity and growing recognition that this young shooter possessed genuine talent. That evening, competitors gathered at a local restaurant for an informal dinner and discussion of the day's events. Marcus was invited to join a table of veterans who wanted to learn more about his background and training. The conversation revealed that Marcus's grandfather had been more than just an enthusiastic shooting hobbyist. He had been a precision marksman instructor for civilian contractors working in various conflict zones. His approach to teaching Marcus had incorporated lessons learned from training professional shooters who operated in high-stress environments. Despite the growing respect from his fellow competitors, Marcus remained humble and eager to learn from their experiences. He asked thoughtful questions about different shooting techniques and equipment choices, demonstrating a genuine desire to improve rather than simply proving himself superior. As the evening progressed, it became clear that Marcus was not just a talented young shooter but also a serious student of marksmanship who understood that skill development was an ongoing process rather than a destination. The first day had established that Marcus belonged in this competition, but the coming stages would present even greater challenges. The distances would increase, the conditions would become more difficult, and the pressure would intensify as the field of competitors narrowed. Several veterans at the dinner table predicted that Marcus would struggle as the competition progressed. They had seen promising young shooters perform well initially, only to falter when faced with the extreme challenges that separated true champions from merely skilled marksmen. Marcus listened to their assessments without defensiveness, acknowledging that he would indeed face greater challenges in the days ahead. However, his calm confidence suggested that he believed his preparation and training had equipped him for whatever the competition might present. As he prepared for bed that night, Marcus reflected on the day's events and the reactions of his fellow competitors. The initial skepticism had been expected, but their growing respect felt encouraging. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and he knew that his true test was yet to come. The second day of competition dawned gray and windy, presenting conditions that would challenge even experienced shooters. Marcus arrived at the range early, finding several other competitors already studying weather conditions and making equipment adjustments. The forecast called for gusting winds up to 20 miles per hour, with occasional light rain that would test everyone's ability to maintain consistent accuracy. The morning briefing outlined the day's challenges. Shooters would face targets at 600 and 800 yards, with the final stage of the day extending to 1,000 yards. These distances would separate the truly skilled marksman from those whose previous success had been aided by relatively forgiving conditions. Marcus's squad had been reorganized based on previous day's performance, placing him with the top performers from other squads. His new squad mates included Williams, a former Marine Corps sniper with 2 combat deployments, Peterson, a police SWAT team leader with 15 years of competitive shooting experience, and Jackson, a civilian contractor who had worked with special operations units overseas. The squad's dynamic was notably different from the previous day. These men were serious competitors who had recognized Marcus's ability and now viewed him as legitimate competition rather than an inexperienced newcomer who might require guidance or supervision. Williams, a soft-spoken man in his early 30s, was particularly intrigued by Marcus's shooting style. During their equipment preparation, he observed Marcus's methodical approach to rifle setup and environmental assessment. "You shoot like someone with military training," Williams commented. "Your fundamentals are better than some guys I served with." Marcus explained that his grandfather had been obsessive about proper technique, requiring him to demonstrate perfect form before allowing him to progress to longer distances or more challenging conditions. Every shooting session had begun with fundamental drills, regardless of Marcus's skill level or the day's objectives. The first stage of the day required engaging targets at 600 yards from a supported kneeling position. The wind was gusting irregularly, making it difficult to predict the exact bullet path for each shot. Competitors had to read the wind conditions carefully and time their shots to coincide with favorable conditions. Marcus's approach to wind reading impressed his squad mates. Rather than relying heavily on instruments, he spent considerable time observing natural wind indicators along the range. He watched grass movement, dust patterns, and the behavior of wind flags at various distances to build a comprehensive picture of the wind conditions affecting his bullet's flight path. When his turn came to shoot, Marcus demonstrated patience that surprised the more experienced shooters. He allowed several opportunities to pass, waiting for wind conditions that matched his calculated shooting solution. His patience paid off with 5 consecutive hits in the high-scoring rings, earning him one of the highest scores for that stage. Peterson, who shot immediately after Marcus, struggled with the same wind conditions and finished with a significantly lower score. As they moved to the next stage, he asked Marcus about his wind reading technique. Marcus explained that his grandfather had taught him to build a mental picture of wind behavior rather than relying on single-point measurements. He learned to identify patterns in wind direction and intensity changes, allowing him to predict brief periods of favorable conditions. The 800-yard stage presented additional complexity. Competitors shot from a barricade position that required them to use artificial support while maintaining stability and accuracy. The combination of challenging position, increased distance, and continuing wind created conditions that revealed the limits of many competitors' abilities. Several highly regarded shooters struggled with this stage, posting scores significantly lower than their previous performances. The conditions were demanding enough that small errors in technique or judgment resulted in clear misses rather than merely reduced scores. Marcus's performance remained remarkably consistent. His shooting position was rock solid, and his timing continued to demonstrate the patience necessary for success in difficult conditions. His 5 shots grouped tightly in the target's center, earning him the highest score for the stage and moving him into serious contention for the overall championship. As word of his continued success spread among competitors and observers, Marcus began receiving attention from industry representatives and military personnel who were present as observers. His performance was becoming impossible to ignore, and speculation grew about his potential for future competitions and possible military or law enforcement career opportunities. The final stage of the day would test competitors at 1,000 yards, a distance where environmental factors became magnified and equipment limitations began to affect even skilled shooters. The wind had intensified throughout the morning, and light rain was beginning to affect visibility and shooting conditions. This stage would use a field shooting position with minimal artificial support, requiring competitors to create stable shooting platforms using available materials and terrain features. The challenge combined extreme distance with demanding physical shooting positions that tested both marksmanship skills and physical conditioning. Marcus studied the range carefully before beginning his shooting sequence. The 1,000-yard distance meant that small errors in wind compensation or shooting technique would result in complete misses. He spent considerable time analyzing wind patterns at various distances along the bullet's flight path, noting that conditions were different at the firing line compared to the target area. His shooting position demonstrated the same attention to fundamentals that had characterized his previous performances. Despite the challenging distance and conditions, his stance was solid and his rifle handling remained smooth and controlled. His first shot at 1,000 yards produced a solid hit, drawing impressed comments from observers who had watched other accomplished shooters struggle with the same conditions. Marcus made a small adjustment for his second shot, accounting for a slight change in wind direction, and scored another center hit. By his fourth shot, a small crowd had gathered behind the firing line to watch. Word had spread that the 19-year-old shooter was achieving remarkable accuracy at extreme distance in challenging conditions. Even competitors who were not currently shooting had come to observe. His fifth and final shot of the stage was perhaps his most impressive. A momentary lull in the wind created ideal conditions, and Marcus took advantage of the opportunity to deliver a shot that hit within inches of dead center. The resulting score was the highest recorded for that stage and firmly established him as a serious contender for the overall championship. As competitors gathered their equipment after the day's shooting concluded, the atmosphere around Marcus had changed completely. The initial skepticism and amusement had been replaced by genuine respect and curiosity about his background and training methods. Jackson, the civilian contractor who had worked overseas, approached Marcus with obvious interest. "I've worked with some of the best shooters in the world, and you're demonstrating skills that usually take years to develop. Who trained you?" Marcus provided more details about his grandfather's background and training philosophy. He explained that his grandfather had emphasized consistent fundamentals and gradual skill development rather than trying to achieve impressive results quickly. Every aspect of marksmanship had been broken down into components and practiced until they became automatic responses. The revelation that his grandfather had been a professional marksmanship instructor helped explain Marcus's advanced skills, but it also raised questions about why such a talented shooter remained relatively unknown in competitive shooting circles. Marcus explained that his grandfather had been private about his professional background and had focused on teaching fundamentals rather than promoting competitive achievement. Their shooting sessions had been about skill development and personal satisfaction rather than preparation for public competition. That evening's gathering was notably different from the previous night. Marcus was no longer treated as an interesting curiosity but as a legitimate competitor who had earned his place among the top shooters. Conversations centered on technical aspects of marksmanship and equipment choices, with Marcus both contributing insights and learning from more experienced shooters. Several veterans shared stories about exceptional young shooters they had encountered during their military careers. They noted that natural talent combined with proper early training could produce remarkable results, but they also emphasized that the final day's challenges would test Marcus in ways that he had not yet experienced. The third day would feature the most extreme distances and challenging conditions of the entire competition. Targets would be engaged at 1,200, 1,500, and, finally, 1,800 yards, distances where atmospheric conditions, equipment performance, and shooter skill all became critical factors. Williams, who had become something of a mentor figure for Marcus, explained the psychological challenges that accompanied extreme distance shooting. The margin for error became so small that shooters often defeated themselves through overthinking or loss of confidence before they addressed the technical challenges. Marcus listened carefully to the advice being offered, acknowledging that the coming challenges would indeed test him in new ways. However, his demeanor remained calm and confident, suggesting that his grandfather's training had included psychological preparation as well as technical instruction. As the evening progressed, Marcus learned that several of his competitors had military or law enforcement backgrounds that included actual sniper operations. Their experience included high-stress situations where a single shot could determine life or death outcomes. The stories they shared provided context for understanding the level of skill and mental toughness required for success at the highest levels of precision shooting. Marcus realized that his accomplishments thus far, while impressive, represented only the beginning of what would be required to claim the overall championship. Despite the growing pressure and expectations, Marcus maintained his focus on the fundamentals that had brought him success. He spent time that evening cleaning and inspecting his rifle, reviewing his shooting data from the day's stages, and preparing mentally for the challenges ahead. His grandfather had taught him that consistency under pressure came from trusting proven fundamentals rather than trying to make dramatic adjustments or overthink complex situations. This philosophy would be tested as never before in the coming days' competition. The other competitors had begun to view Marcus not just as a talented young shooter but as a serious threat to their own championship aspirations. The psychological dynamic of the competition was shifting as established veterans found themselves having to account for an unexpected challenger who had seemingly appeared from nowhere. As Marcus prepared for sleep, he reflected on how much his life had changed in just 2 days. He had arrived as an unknown quantity hoping to test himself against serious competition. He was now recognized as a legitimate contender for a championship that would establish his reputation in the precision shooting community. Tomorrow would determine whether his remarkable start could be sustained under the ultimate pressure of championship-level competition at extreme distances. The final day would test everything his grandfather had taught him and reveal whether natural talent and solid fundamentals could overcome the advantages of extensive competitive experience. The final day arrived with perfect shooting conditions that seemed almost too good to be true. The wind had calmed to barely detectable levels, visibility was excellent, and the temperature was stable. These ideal conditions meant that equipment performance and shooter skill would be the primary determining factors, eliminating the variable of challenging weather that had affected previous stages. Marcus arrived at the range to find that news of his performance had spread beyond the immediate competition community. Several military recruiters were present as observers, along with representatives from firearms manufacturers and shooting sports organizations. The presence of these additional observers created an atmosphere of heightened attention that added psychological pressure to an already demanding final day. The final day's format was designed to identify the absolute best precision shooter among the competitors. 3 stages would test shooting at 1,200, 1,500, and 1,800 yards respectively. Only the top 12 competitors from the previous days qualify to participate, representing the cream of the nation's precision shooting talent. Marcus found himself competing against men whose names were legendary in military and competitive shooting circles. Rodriguez, the range officer who had inspected his rifle on the first day, approached him during the morning preparation period. "Son, you've already accomplished something remarkable just by qualifying for today's competition," Rodriguez said quietly. "These distances will test everything you think you know about shooting. Stay focused on your fundamentals and trust your training." The first stage began at 1,200 yards, a distance that pushed the boundaries of what most rifles and shooters could accomplish reliably. At this range, bullet drop was measured in feet rather than inches, and even minor variations in ammunition performance or environmental conditions could affect shot placement significantly. Marcus's Barrett was well suited for extreme distance shooting, but he would be competing against custom rifles that had been specifically built for long-range precision work. Many of his competitors had invested tens of thousands of dollars in equipment optimization, while Marcus relied on his grandfather's well-maintained but fundamentally stock rifle. The shooting position for the 1,200-yard stage was prone with bipod support, allowing competitors to create stable platforms for their attempts. Each shooter would fire 3 rounds for score, with points awarded based on proximity to the target center. The scoring system was unforgiving at this distance. Shots that would have earned high scores at shorter ranges might not even hit the target. Marcus's preparation for the stage demonstrated the methodical approach that had served him well throughout the competition. He took careful range measurements, recorded atmospheric conditions, and calculated his shooting solution using a simple ballistic chart that his grandfather had helped him develop for his specific rifle and ammunition combination. Many of his competitors used sophisticated electronic ballistic calculators that could account for dozens of environmental variables and provide precise shooting solutions. Marcus's approach appeared almost primitive by comparison, but his results had proven that simple methods executed properly could be highly effective. When his turn came to shoot, Marcus settled into position with the same calm confidence that had characterized his earlier performances. The 1,200-yard distance required him to aim significantly above the target to account for bullet drop, trusting his calculations and equipment to deliver the bullet to the intended point of impact. His first shot struck the target solidly, earning appreciative comments from observers who understood the difficulty of achieving first-round hits at such extreme distance. Marcus made a small adjustment for his second shot, accounting for a barely perceptible change in wind direction that most shooters would not have noticed. His second shot hit even closer to the target center, demonstrating his ability to make accurate corrections based on observation of bullet impact. The improvement from first to second shot showed that he possessed the analytical skills necessary for success at extreme distances. Marcus's third shot was his best of the series, striking within inches of the target center and earning him one of the highest scores recorded for the stage. His performance had been consistent with his earlier success and maintained his position among the top competitors heading into the more challenging stages. As competitors moved to the 1,500-yard line, the atmosphere became noticeably more tense. This distance represented the practical limit for many shooting systems, and several accomplished marksmen had historically struggled to achieve consistent accuracy at this range. The 1,500-yard stage would use a field-expedient shooting position that required competitors to build stable platforms using available materials. This added element of fieldcraft separated pure bench rest shooters from those who could perform under more realistic conditions. Marcus's approach to building his shooting position reflected practical experience rather than theoretical knowledge. His movements were efficient and purposeful, suggesting that he had practiced constructing field shooting positions under his grandfather's guidance. The shooting solution for 1,500 yards required significant adjustments to scope settings and aiming points. At this distance, the bullet's flight time was long enough that even slight movements during trigger manipulation could affect accuracy. Mental discipline became as important as physical technique. Marcus's performance at 1,500 yards was remarkable even by the standards he had established earlier in the competition. His 3 shots formed a tight group near the target center, demonstrating consistency that impressed even veteran long-range shooters who understood the difficulty of the achievement. Williams, who had become an informal mentor during the competition, watched Marcus's shooting with obvious amazement. "I've seen guys with 20 years of experience struggle to do what you just did," he commented. "Your grandfather must have been an exceptional instructor." The success at 1,500 yards moved Marcus into clear contention for the overall championship. Only one other competitor had matched his performance at that distance, setting up a dramatic conclusion for the final stage at 1,800 yards. The 1,800-yard stage represented the ultimate test of precision shooting skill. At this distance, even the smallest errors in technique, equipment, or environmental assessment would result in complete misses. The challenge was so extreme that many accomplished shooters considered it more of an exhibition than a practical shooting test. Historical records for the competition showed that very few shooters had ever achieved hits at 1,800 yards under competition conditions. The stage was designed to identify truly exceptional marksmen and separate them from merely excellent shooters. Marcus's primary competition for the championship came from Thompson, the former Army Ranger who had initially questioned his experience on the first day. Thompson was shooting a custom rifle that had cost more than most people's cars and represented the absolute pinnacle of precision shooting equipment. The shooting position for the final stage was unsupported prone, requiring competitors to create stability using only their body position and sling support. This eliminated many of the mechanical advantages available at shorter distances and placed premium emphasis on fundamental marksmanship skills. Marcus studied the 1,800-yard target through his scope, calculating the shooting solution that would be required for success. The target appeared impossibly small at that distance, and the required bullet drop meant that he would be aiming several feet above the target to achieve a hit. His preparation was methodical and unhurried despite the pressure of the situation. He recorded atmospheric conditions, confirmed his range measurement, and calculated the precise scope adjustments needed for the extreme distance. When Marcus settled into his final shooting position, an unusual quiet fell over the range. Word had spread about the young shooter's remarkable performance, and even competitors who had finished their own shooting had gathered to observe the conclusion of the championship. Marcus's first shot at 1,800 yards seemed to hang in the air forever before impacting near the target center. The hit drew gasps of amazement from observers who understood that achieving first-round accuracy at such distance was exceptional even for world-class marksmen. His second shot struck even closer to dead center, demonstrating that his first shot success had not been luck but rather the result of accurate calculations and precise execution. The crowd of observers grew larger as word spread about the extraordinary shooting taking place. Marcus prepared for his final shot knowing that his performance thus far had already exceeded most expectations. However, the championship would be determined by consistency across all three shots, and a poor final shot could cost him the title he had worked toward. The final shot of Marcus's competition was perhaps the most pressure-filled moment of his young life. Hundreds of experienced military and law enforcement personnel were watching, along with industry representatives who could influence his future opportunities in shooting sports or military service. Marcus's shot-to-shot routine remained identical to his previous shots, demonstrating the mental discipline that his grandfather had emphasized during training. He took the same amount of time for preparation, used the same breathing pattern, and executed the shot with the same trigger control that had served him throughout the competition. His final shot struck the target dead center, earning the maximum possible points and completing one of the most remarkable performances in the competition's history. The crowd erupted in applause and congratulations that recognized both his exceptional shooting and the improbability of his success. Thompson, shooting immediately after Marcus, faced the enormous pressure of needing a perfect performance to match the young shooter's score. Despite his years of experience and superior equipment, the pressure affected his shooting and his final score fell short of Marcus's total. As the final scores were calculated and verified, it became clear that Marcus had not merely won the competition but had set new records for several individual stages. His performance at extreme distances had exceeded historical benchmarks and established new standards for precision shooting achievement. The award ceremony that followed was unlike anything Marcus had experienced. He found himself surrounded by military personnel, industry representatives, and media members who wanted to understand how a 19-year-old had defeated some of the nation's most accomplished marksmen. His acceptance speech was brief and humble, crediting his grandfather's instruction and emphasizing that his success had resulted from consistent practice of fundamental techniques rather than any special natural ability. The response demonstrated the maturity and character that had impressed his fellow competitors throughout the week. As the formal competition concluded, Marcus reflected on how completely his life had changed in just 3 days. He had arrived as an unknown young shooter hoping to test himself against serious competition. He was leaving as a national champion whose performance had captured attention throughout the shooting community. #Young Sniper Story Part for the weeks following the championship brought changes to Marcus's life that he had never anticipated. News of his victory had spread throughout military and law enforcement communities, generating interest from organizations around the world. His phone rang constantly with interview requests, sponsorship offers, and invitations to participate in international competitions. Major firearms manufacturers reached out with offers to develop signature equipment lines and endorsement deals. Military recruiting offices contacted him daily with offers of specialized training programs and fast-track advancement opportunities. Competitive shooting organizations invited him to join their elite development programs. Despite the sudden attention and opportunities, Marcus remained grounded in the fundamental values his grandfather had instilled. He carefully considered each opportunity against his long-term goals and values rather than being swayed by immediate financial rewards or recognition. The shooting community's response to his victory was overwhelmingly positive. Veterans who had initially been skeptical became some of his strongest supporters, appreciating both his skill and his humble approach to success. Many acknowledged that his performance had reminded them why they had fallen in love with marksmanship in the first place. Marcus decided to accept a position with a military contractor that specialized in training precision marksmen for special operations units. The role would allow him to learn from the world's best shooters while contributing his own skills to important national security missions. His new position took him to a classified training facility where he worked alongside instructors who had operational experience in various conflict zones. The training environment was far more demanding than civilian competition, requiring him to perform under stress conditions that simulated real-world operational requirements. During his first weeks at the facility, Marcus encountered shooting challenges that tested him in ways the civilian competition had not. Night shooting with thermal imaging systems, shooting from moving vehicles, and engaging multiple targets under time pressure required skills beyond pure marksmanship accuracy. His instructors were impressed by his ability to adapt fundamental shooting skills to new and challenging scenarios. The solid foundation his grandfather had provided proved invaluable as Marcus learned to apply basic principles in increasingly complex situations. One of his primary instructors was a former Navy SEAL named Collins who had served multiple combat deployments as a sniper team leader. Collins had initially been skeptical about training someone so young, but Marcus's performance quickly won his respect and confidence. Collins explained that competition shooting, while valuable, represented only one aspect of military precision shooting. Operational requirements included factors such as equipment reliability under adverse conditions, target identification under stress, and the psychological demands of engaging human targets in life-or-death situations. Marcus's training program included exposure to various weapon systems, ballistic software packages, and advanced optical devices that represented the current state of military technology. He learned to adapt his shooting techniques to different rifles, calibers, and mission requirements. The psychological aspects of his training proved particularly challenging. Learning to maintain accuracy while experiencing the stress of simulated combat conditions required mental disciplines that went beyond the focus needed for competition shooting. Marcus had to develop new coping mechanisms for performance under extreme pressure. His fellow trainees included experienced military personnel who were transitioning to sniper roles and civilian contractors who would support special operations missions. The diverse backgrounds created a learning environment where everyone contributed unique perspectives and experiences. Marcus's competitive success had earned him respect within the training program, but he still had to prove himself in the more demanding operational environment. His willingness to learn and adapt impressed instructors who had seen many skilled shooters struggle with the transition from competition to operational requirements. During advanced training exercises, Marcus began to demonstrate the same consistency and adaptability that had characterized his competition performance. His ability to learn new techniques quickly and apply them reliably under pressure suggested that his skills would translate effectively to operational environments. 6 months into his training program, Marcus participated in a joint exercise with active duty military units. The exercise involved complex scenarios that tested shooting skills, tactical decision-making, and teamwork under realistic stress conditions. His performance during the exercise exceeded expectations and earned recognition from military personnel who had decades of operational experience. Several special operations commanders expressed interest in having Marcus support their unit's training programs. The exercise also provided Marcus with perspective on how his skills could contribute to important national security missions. The abstract target shooting of competition was replaced by scenarios where accurate shooting could protect fellow service members and accomplish critical mission objectives. Following the successful exercise, Marcus was offered opportunities to deploy overseas in support of actual military operations. The prospect of applying his skills in real-world scenarios was both exciting and sobering, representing the ultimate test of his training and abilities. His grandfather's health began declining during this period, making their time together increasingly precious. Marcus made every effort to visit regularly and share his experiences from training. His grandfather expressed pride in seeing how the fundamental skills they had practiced together were being applied to serve important purposes. During one visit, his grandfather revealed more details about his own military service and the experiences that had shaped his approach to teaching marksmanship. The stories provided context for understanding why his instruction had emphasized character development alongside technical skills. Marcus learned that his grandfather had lost friends to enemy sniper fire during his service, experiences that had motivated his later work training defensive marksmen. The revelation helped Marcus understand the serious responsibility that came with exceptional shooting abilities. As his grandfather's condition worsened, Marcus made the difficult decision to delay his overseas deployment to spend more time with family. His instructors and military contacts supported his decision, recognizing the importance of family obligations and personal values. His grandfather passed away peacefully on a quiet autumn morning, surrounded by family members who had benefited from his wisdom and guidance over the years. The funeral drew attendees from across the military and shooting communities who had been touched by his service and instruction. During the funeral service, Marcus spoke about how his grandfather's teaching had extended far beyond marksmanship techniques. The fundamental disciplines of patience, attention to detail, and mental toughness had applications throughout life and contributed to success in any challenging endeavor. Following the funeral, Marcus inherited his grandfather's extensive collection of shooting equipment and training materials. The collection included detailed records of training methodologies, ballistic data, and personal reflections on effective instruction techniques. Marcus realized that he had received not just technical training but also a legacy of knowledge about developing shooting skills in others. His grandfather's notes revealed sophisticated understanding of how to identify individual learning styles and adapt instruction methods accordingly. The inheritance motivated Marcus to consider how he could honor his grandfather's memory by continuing to develop and share marksmanship knowledge. He began developing training programs that combined his grandfather's fundamental approach with modern technology and techniques. His first independent training course attracted students from military, law enforcement, and civilian backgrounds who wanted to learn from the young champion's methods. The course emphasized the same fundamental principles that had guided Marcus's own development. The success of his training programs led to additional opportunities to influence marksmanship instruction within military and law enforcement organizations. Marcus found that his competitive success provided credibility that allowed him to advocate for training approaches that prioritized fundamentals over advanced technology. His work as an instructor revealed that many shooters struggled with basic skills that had been glossed over in their rush to achieve advanced capabilities. Marcus's emphasis on fundamental development helped students achieve more consistent performance across various shooting scenarios. Several years after his championship victory, Marcus reflected on how the experience had changed his life's direction. What had begun as a personal challenge to test his skills had evolved into a career dedicated to developing defensive marksmanship capabilities for military and law enforcement personnel. His competition victory had opened doors to opportunities he had never imagined, but the fundamental values his grandfather had instilled remained his primary guides for decision-making. The success had been meaningful not because of the recognition it brought, but because it validated the importance of dedicated practice and proper instruction. Marcus continued competing occasionally, both to maintain his own skills and to promote marksmanship sports among young people. However, his primary focus had shifted to developing training programs that could help others achieve their potential as precision marksmen. The young man who had surprised the shooting community with his extraordinary performance had matured into an instructor and developer who was helping shape the future of marksmanship training. His legacy would ultimately be measured not by his competition victories, but by the skills and values he passed on to the next generation of shooters. Looking back on his grandfather's influence, Marcus understood that the true gift had not been the technical instruction, but rather the example of how to approach challenges with patience, dedication, and humility. These qualities had served him well in competition and would continue guiding him throughout his career in service to others.